Hope can be an incredibly powerful force. Hope is more than a motivational thought or a fading daydream. Hope is a nothing is impossible with faith firestorm that refuses to be put out. It is an awareness that God is actually expecting, looking, and longing to show you everything that is good and possible. Hope is what stabilizes our frantic thoughts and emotions. It's an awareness that there is no problem that is too big. These days, it's pretty easy to be worn down by hopelessness. People lose hope when they experience overwhelming loss, repeated failures, impossible situations, or when they're hurt by people they trust. Like many of us in this room, I understand what it's like to feel hopeless. Last year, I sat next to my friend Margot, who at 29 years old was diagnosed with breast cancer, and at 33, it became metastatic. I prayed with her and her family. I cried repeatedly outside of Sloan Kettering every time I left her room because of how hopeless I felt. I bore witness to her pain, her anger, and her life. It was, without a doubt, the most difficult thing that I have ever had to face in my life. Because to feel hopeless is to be completely lost. Hopelessness can best be described as being on a boat without a compass, sailing across the ocean and hoping that the winds will guide you wherever it is that you need to go. Unfortunately, Margot died last March, 4 years after she was first diagnosed. Last December, before she spent her last time in the hospital, Margot sat down to write what would ultimately become her eulogy. And though she knew her time was short, and though she was in tremendous pain, she never once let it show. She says, "I want you all to know that it is so weird to have someone read a speech from a person who has passed away. But then I thought about it and felt like it would be my way of connecting with all of you here. I love you all. You have given me strength, independence, support, self-confidence, and motivation. You all have showed me what family means, and I feel lucky and blessed to have all of you. When the pain was too much and when I was so sick from one more treatment, all of you gave me the hope and strength that I needed to keep going. I never lost hope because of you. And though cancer will take my body, it will not take my spirit. I only hope now that it will mean something, that this pain will make a difference, that I am here for a bigger purpose." When Margot sent me these words for me to read at her funeral, I realized that though we all sometimes do feel hopeless, she never lost hope. She somehow found the strength to remain positive in the face of the greatest challenge that anyone could ever face. Instead of saying to herself, "If I don't expect anything good to happen, I won't be disappointed when it does," she chose to believe that something good can and will happen. Ultimately, hope didn't change her diagnosis, but it did affect how she was going to live with it. Hope is a positive expectation that something good is going to happen to you. It is not wishy-washy, a vague wait-and-see attitude, but an action that we must choose to take on as a purpose each and every single day. Hope and faith go hand in hand. Hope can allow us to endure hardships and long waiting periods. During the month of Elul, in Psalm 27, we read, "Kaveh el Adonai, chazak ve'amat libecha v'kaveh el Adonai." Hope for the eternal. Be brave and courageous, and let your heart be hopeful. Hope dares us to believe. It says to us, you know what? Things might just work out after all. This is perhaps best illustrated in the work of Viktor Frankl, who in 1946 published Man's Search for Meaning, chronicling his experiences as a prisoner in concentration camps during World War II. According to Frankl, the way a prisoner hoped for the future affected his or her longevity. Reflecting upon his time as a prisoner, he noticed something very unusual. The people who survived were not always the ones that you would expect. Many who were physically strong wasted it away and died, while others who were much weaker physically grew stronger and survived. Why? What was it that enabled them to hang on through a living hell? Franco believed that the difference between those who survived and those who perished was simply hope. Those who survived never gave up their belief that their lives had meaning. That despite everything going on around them, it would one day end and they would live meaningful and purposeful lives. What is the basic human drive? The one that gives life value? It is the ability to live with a sense of hope and possibility. Not pleasure, not power, but hope and meaning. Franco writes, "What man actually needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for some goal worthy of him. What he needs is not the discharge of tension at any cost, but the call of a potential meaning waiting to be fulfilled. For some of us, that meaning could be our family or our friends. For others, it could be the thrill and challenge of work or the opportunity of joy and happiness. But what is clear in Frankel's approach is that hope and purpose have a powerful and positive influence on life." Now, I'm not trying to stand up here to suggest that those who survived the Holocaust all had one thing in common. Some believed it was definitely an amount of luck or chance that got them through. For others, divine intervention was involved. But I do believe that the power of positive thinking and believing that things will get better, of holding on to the possibility of what will be or what could be, can inspire even the weakest amongst us to live just one more day. When one actually stops and considers the concept of hope, it is both incredibly simple and incredibly complex. It is not something that you can measure, and there is not much in the way of understanding why one person is more hopeful than another. But our rabbis have a very unique way of looking at it. In Pirkei Avot, we learn that Rabbi Levitas of Yavne said that we must be exceedingly humble, for the hope of man is like worms. Shetikvat enosh rima. The hope of man is like worms. Now, at its essence, the worm is a fairly simple creature. It has the ability to regenerate. It lives in the ground. And other than the occasional rainy day or fishing pier, it rarely makes its presence known to the world. And yet, without these simple and mundane creatures, the world's ecosystem would not function. Worms help to increase the amount of air and water that gets into the soil. They break down organic matter like leaves and grass into things that plants can use. Worms are like free farm help. They turn the soil over and over, hiding beneath the surface in plain sight. Hope is the worm of the human spirit. It sits beneath the surface, turning itself within each of us, aerating the spirit and lifting us up, moving us to a place of function and possibility. In the history of the Jewish people, hope has lived just beneath the surface for thousands of years. And all that needed to bloom was just a little bit of water, a bit of fertilization, of inspiration. As a people, we are well acquainted with long waiting periods and hardships. For 2,000 years, we hoped and prayed to be back in the land of Israel. The hope for the redemption of the Jewish people, the end of exile, and the return to our people's land is a central component of Jewish religious belief. But the transformation of this religious belief into a political ideology at the end of the 19th century led to the creation of the Zionist movement. For thousands of years, our people dreamed of an existence and a life in Israel. We dreamed of coming home, back to the land of our mothers, our fathers, the land of David. Lihiyot am chofshi be'artzeinu. To be a free people in our own land, free to do what we want, free to live our lives as Jews. free to choose for ourselves how we wish to live, to rule, to vote, and to exist. In 1896, Theodor Herzl published his vision for the Jewish state in Der Judenstaat. He writes, "The idea I have developed in this pamphlet is an ancient one. It is the restoration of the Jewish state. The plan would seem mad enough if a single individual were to undertake it, but if many Jews simultaneously agree on it, it is entirely reasonable, and its achievement presents no difficulties worth mentioning. The idea depends only on the number of its adherents. Perhaps the most ambitious amongst us, to whom every road of advancement is now closed and for whom the Jewish state throws open a bright prospect of freedom, happiness, and honor. Perhaps they will see to it that this idea is spread. It depends on the Jewish people themselves whether this political document remains for the present a political romance." In so many ways, Herzl's dream of the 19th century still exists and is alive today. The people of Israel are still trying to live autonomous lives. They are still trying to build something beautiful and flourishing in the desert. The dream that we would have a Jewish state, alive and thriving, is still a dream. Yet the miracle of the Jewish people in the 20th century and the reality that the state of Israel exists today is not only about the hope of a generation, it is also about action and real work. Hope without action is just a dream. But when we put that hope to good use, when we let it stir the soil and the soul, it can become something greater, something that we can feel, we can touch. It is how we turn our dreams into reality. When I was in Israel this past summer with Cantor Garfine and a number of the members of our community, I spent quite a bit of time thinking about Hatikvah, the Israeli national anthem, which literally translates to the hope. But what does that mean? It is more than just a longing and belief that one day we will come back to the birthplace of our people. Although that is certainly one piece of it, there is so much more. For the hope of yesterday has become more than just a longing. The hope of today is a reality, or at least an ideal, a purpose that we can work towards. Signed and written in 1947, the Israeli Declaration of Independence lays out explicitly what has been fought for and what we continue to struggle for. The state of Israel will be open for Jewish immigration and for the ingathering of the exiles. It will foster the development of the country for the benefit of all of its inhabitants. It will be based on freedom, justice, and peace as envisioned by the prophets of Israel. It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all of its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. It will safeguard the holy places of all religions, and it will be faithful to the principles. The dream and the hope of our people, for thousands of years as outlined by Theodor Herzl, would remain such until reality struck in the 20th century. We as a people in the mid-20th century needed to find, as Viktor Frankl said, meaning or purpose. Those who survived the Holocaust needed to find a way to move on, to continue to live, to survive, and to hope. They even acknowledge this in the same declaration when they write, "The catastrophe which recently befell the Jewish people, the massacre of millions of Jews in Europe, was another clear demonstration of the urgency of solving the problem of its homelessness by reestablishing in Eretz Yisrael the Jewish state, which would open the gates of the homeland wide to every Jew and confer upon the Jewish people the status of a fully privileged member of the community of nations." That was the purpose and the meaning that our people needed to continue, that we in the 20th century, out of the ashes of the Holocaust, needed to survive. And today, though the hope remains that our people will continue to live and govern ourselves At its core, the ideals and ideas of Israel remain as a place where all of us can find our home and our hope. Is that not one of the many reasons why we are all here today? For hope is one part of the High Holy Days. It is not only about a dream, it is also about action. Because hoping that something works out is suggesting that you have no control over it, as if it's totally up to luck or chance. Judaism has an antidote and a strategy for how we can change, for how we can make this moment not be just about hoping that we will be better this year, but that we will actually do better. The Torah teaches us that it is never too late to change. Changing for the better is called doing teshuvah. The Hebrew word teshuvah, which is often translated as repentance, actually means to return to God, to return to ourselves. It's true. We all have faults. We all make mistakes that cause us to suffer in some way or another. I know in my life I have inadvertently hurt people, I have disappointed. I know I could always be better. And I realize that life has its ups and downs. It's just the way the world operates. We all know some days will be good and some days bad. Well, maybe not bad exactly, just less good. But I think what matters and what's important is that we don't focus on what we wish we could have done or what we wish we could do or should do. Judaism actually gives us the skills and pathways to change. There are some things that are out of our control, and no matter how much we hope they will get better or change, we can't do anything about it. But those things that we can control, those actions and decisions that we can make that are under our control, that is power. First, we must find a way to recognize that we have made a mistake. It is about finding out why we did what it is that we did. Then we must feel a sense of regret. Regret, as opposed to guilt, is that state of agitation in which one feels a sense of loss. We must do what is known as azizah, or stopping the action, to no longer do what we were doing. And after we have recognized our mistake and felt that sense of regret, when we come face to face with it again, we must stop. And finally, we must actually do a confession, or vidui. In other words, just go say you're sorry. Because when we verbalize our regret, it finalizes everything. There is no escape. The truth about our actions and our consequences are laid bare for all to see when we utter these simple words, I am sorry. I feel awful about what I did. I won't do it again, I promise. Rabbi Levine often talks about the power of this day and the power of the moments when we stand together as a community, of individuals praying to God, together asking for forgiveness. When we stand in confession to each other and ourselves, what it is that we actually did wrong, we are praying that we can move the God from the God of judgment to the God of mercy, from the God that can take a life to a God that will keep it. When we do this completely, the rabbis talk of an image when God literally descends wrapped in a tallis from the heavens as the gates are closing during the Ilah to pardon us with the words, Salachti et zidonecha, I have forgiven all that you have done. It is a powerful image, a really moving idea that God can and will be moved and can and will forgive, but only when we confess and acknowledge that we have done wrong. Teshuvah is not easy. It is not a straight path, and there are very few straight paths in life. This is no different. I know that I can get in the way of myself all the time. I definitely fall victim to denial that I did anything wrong or rationalization, maybe even forgiving myself just a little bit too much. It's hard stuff, and it's supposed to be. Because if it was easy, it wouldn't have much meaning. And there can be great meaning in the struggle and challenge of teshuvah. We can learn a lot about ourselves and even repair lost relationships or damaged egos. Perhaps this is the year or the season when we finally stop hoping that we will be better and start actually being better. So now back in the hospital room with my friend Margot, it was just the two of us. Towards the end, these moments were few and far between, with doctors and nurses and friends and family running in and out. This moment is one that I will never forget. I asked Margot, how did you find the strength to keep going through all of these tests? Steps forward, steps backwards, all of the challenges. She looked at me with tired eyes, eyes that were once the bluest eyes I had ever seen, and said, "You know, I thought about giving up so many times. From the first moment I was diagnosed to when it progressed to the point of where it is now. But I still do believe that this diagnosis, this disease, this reality that I am in has to mean something. It has to become something. There has to be some good out of this. So I decided to not let cancer define me, but instead to find a purpose and meaning in what I'm facing. I found meaning and hope in my friends and family. I joined up with organizations. I raised money to fight cancer. If I didn't live a life of meaning even when I was dying, then it would all have been for nothing. So I found hope and joy and possibility in this darkness. I found my purpose in life, even if it is in my inevitable death. And I pray that all of us this year will too. Shana Tova.